Laker Nation HBO fans, what's going on? Elliot here from Movie Files, back again with a brand new TV review, and today we're discussing the first episode of the brand new HBO sports drama series by the name of Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. Your boy's a Laker fan. I was really excited for the show. Watched the first episode, and we're talking pros, we're talking cons. Will I be watching this on a week-to-week basis? Should you be watching this? We're breaking it all down here in this review. But before we do so, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. Laker Nation, come and join this awesome community filled with movie reviews, TV reviews. I want you to come and join the community, so make sure you're subscribed and hitting that notification bell. And as you can see on the screen now, if you enjoyed this review, make sure to give it a thumbs up, but also share this review to all the Laker fans you know out there, HBO fans you know out there, NBA fans you know out there that might like this type of show. But more importantly, once you've seen this first episode, what did you think? Let's talk about your pros, your cons, your thoughts on the style and the substance, the performances. What were some things that didn't work for you all in the first episode, and will you be watching this on a week-to-week basis? But more importantly, let's talk about these Lakers Nation. Let's talk about your fandom. When did you first become a Lakers fan? If you are a fan of the Lakers or the NBA in general, and if so, what's your favorite team? Who's your favorite player within the Lakers dynasty and the Lakers run in the NBA? Let's talk about that in the comments below. So for me personally, I was beyond excited for the show. Number one, yes, I am a Lakers fan. I don't follow the Lakers as much as I used to, especially with the late, great Kobe Bean Bryant retiring. But I still check in on AD and Bron and Russ and kind of the turmoil they're going through right now, but I'm still a fan of NBA. I grew up playing basketball. I love it. It's my favorite sport, but in particularly the Lakers, man. Listen, I mentioned how Kobe was my guy, my favorite basketball player of all time. Him and Shaq and Phil winning those 3 rings. Obviously, Kobe and Powell winning those 2 rings, and then him going out on a high, that 61-point game in Utah, one of the best moments of Kobe's career. But I'm a fan, but being a fan of the Lakers, you got to respect what came before them, and that is the first official Showtime Lakers in the 80s. Magic, Dr. Buzz, Pat Riley. I know some things, being that I am a fan of the Lakers and Magic Johnson's the greatest point guard of all time, but I didn't know all the things. So that's what really got me intrigued with this show, and knowing that Adam McKay's behind it. I'm a fan of his movie projects, him being one of the executive producers of the best show on HBO, which is Succession. And then you have Max Borenstein, who I know his work from the Monsterverse. So I'm like, okay, I'm liking what I'm seeing. The cast looks great. I'm a Lakers fan, so let's give this damn thing a watch. And here we are talking about the first episode. I will warn you all, I guess I should say, this will be a spoiler review to an extent, because I hate to say spoiler because this is factual stuff. Some of the stuff is made up for drama reasons to make it more of an entertaining show, but for the most part, you can look up most of this stuff. So I guess I'll warn you, we'll be talking a little bit about the spoilers in regards to this first episode, but let's get into my thoughts of this first episode, which I thought it did such a great job of establishing its tone, its style, its entertainment meets a little bit of drama, but it's also the way that they capture. Adam McKay directs this first episode, and the way he captures the 80s and captures Dr. Bus, captures a young 19-year-old Magic Johnson in the Showtime Lakers. I really enjoyed this first episode, but we're going to get into my reasons why, starting off with just kind of the synopsis of this first episode is basically following and meeting Dr. Jerry Buss, this kind of playboy billionaire, as he's in the Playboy Mansion, and how he's diving into buying this team and how he considers basketball to be on the wrong end of the entertainment aspect of it, and also sharing that with meeting Magic Johnson, 19-year-old phenom coming out of Michigan, going into the league, and kind of what that looks like is kind of the basis of this first episode, and kind of getting more into, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's breaking the fourth wall, which we'll talk about, but it's also some serious stuff going on in this show, and in particularly in the first episode. And again, knowing Magic Johnson's history to a certain extent, that first scene really kind of lets you know, yeah, we're going to have fun. We're going to dive into some of the more entertaining aspects of the 80s, but we're also going to talk about these characters and what certain decisions, how it affected their career. So that first scene, Magic Johnson, 1991, in the doctor's office, learning about his HIV, and if you all don't know, that was one of the 3 times he retired, because, and I'm really excited to see if the show tackles how NBA players kind of looked at that, and how he had to lead the lead and come back to lead and become a coach and being the player that he, we know he was. was and how he ended up being who he is today. So I'm really intrigued to know how the show's going to tackle that. If it's going to really, because obviously the show right now is focusing on the 80s, but knowing that we flash forward, I wonder and I hope they explore that element of Magic Johnson, because again, greatest point guard of all time, but I would love to kind of shine a light on that particular part of his career. But going in back into the timeline we're in, which is in the 80s, meeting Jerry Buss, played by John C. Reilly, who we'll talk about his performance in a second. But I know Jerry Buss later in his career, right? When he was, drafting Kobe, when he traded for Shaq, when he got Phil Jackson and assembled the team with, the Robert Horrys of the world, the Derek Fishers of the world, the Brian Shaws of the world. I know that version of him. I didn't really know the Playboy version of him. So seeing him waking up in the Playboy mansion and just his personality, he seems so carefree, happy going, spending money that he might not have. And that aspect of the first episode of him buying the Lakers and how much debt he's in and him going through his divorce was some of the stuff I really enjoyed about this first episode. And again, that breaking of the fourth wall when he's breaking down the figures of how he's going to buy the team. I really kind of enjoyed that Adam McKay-ism with this first episode, but also switching gears into talking about how he wanted to change the style of basketball, because again, NBA is my favorite sport. I grew up playing basketball. Again, not necessarily being so tied into Laker Nation now, but still following the game of basketball. It's so interesting to hear the state of basketball in the 80s and how they were on the verge of bankruptcy, but also shining a light on LA. I've never been to La La Land. I would love to go, but knowing that Los Angeles is, especially during that time, was more of a Hollywood movie star city and not so much a basketball city was very fascinating. So I'm really excited to see how Magic and the team coming together, how it switches that narrative. Again, it's still Hollywood, right? But switching that narrative to say, hey, we got a pretty good basketball team here. Let's go to the Forum and see what this Showtime Lakers is all about. So I'm really excited to explore more about that element of the show. But more in particularly, again, loving Magic Johnson. I love, and I didn't really know this. Again, I don't know if this is more dramatized or if this was real life, but the fact that him being potentially drafted to the Lakers, I won't give that aspect away because that happens a little bit later in the episode, but the fact that it came down to a coin flip between him going to the Los Angeles Lakers or from my hometown, Chicago Bulls, which obviously that would have been incredibly different. I don't know if, Magic and MJ would have been playing together if he would have been drafted by the Bulls at that time, but that just blows my mind to know that that was potentially a possibility. Was very intriguing, especially being a basketball fan. But let's kind of get into these performances. John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss is fantastic. Again, John, if you all do not know, just a little bit behind the scenes, but Adam McKay, John C. Reilly, and Will Ferrell are really good friends. If you all don't know, Will Ferrell, this was the role of his lifetime. He wanted to play Jerry Buss for a very long time. Unfortunately, his really good friend and business partner, Adam McKay, decided to go with their other friend, John C. Reilly, and they've actually have had a falling out. So, but I will say, I love Will Ferrell. John C. Reilly was the perfect fit. He really kind of embodies the character. Again, the Playboy lifestyle, the happy personality, the kind of carefree personality. I'm really enjoying what we got with John C. Reilly in this role. And he was really kind of the standout character for me. Him and his chemistry with Magic Johnson was fantastic. But also an actress like Jason Clarke as Jerry West, considered to be one of the greatest players of all time, especially Mr. Laker himself. I personally think it's Kobe, but I respect what Jerry West did to the game. And I didn't know Jerry was such an angry individual, but it makes sense when you think of his career, winning that one championship in 72 and obviously being the logo for the MVP award, was the logo for many years for the All-Star award. But he only has one championship, and it's all about championships, especially when you're considered to be one of the greatest of all time. So it makes sense why he's always upset, because he always has that being a outstanding player, but a player that didn't have all the ships to kind of stand up behind those skills. So I didn't know all of that stuff with Jerry West, but I love with Jason Clarke. He has some pretty standout moments. He's not in an entire episode, but I really enjoyed what we got there. But this is my first time being exposed to Quincy Isaiah, who does play Magic Johnson. Again, playing a 19 19-year-old phenom coming out of Michigan, having his battles with Larry Bird, which I'm really excited to learn more about that and seeing it, how the show tackles that rivalry. But I really enjoyed his charisma. Again, I don't know if this is his first time acting, but I love his personality. I think he embraces what made Magic so special, which is some of the things that Jerry West didn't like about Magic, was how personable he was, how kind he was. Very similar to, you think of LeBron James. He's not always like Mr. Tough Guy, not talking to the media. He has that more, I'm loving life, I'm living life type of personality. And I think he kind of got that from Magic Johnson. And you kind of see that within his first episode. But I really enjoyed what Quincy brings to the role, what he brought to this first episode. And I'm really kind of excited to explore what we get with his performance in the greatest point guard of all time in Magic Johnson. Also, small role or small moment in the show, but Solomon Hughes, who plays Kareem, I liked his one scene when he was on set filming Airplane. I'm really excited to see the dynamic between when Magic got on the team and him being the captain at the time. And obviously, Kareem's one of the greatest players of all time, considered to be the greatest center of all time. I loved his one scene, but also, I'm a fan of Rob Morgan. He always knows the assignment. He plays, Earvin Johnson Sr. Seeing that dynamic between him and his son going into the negotiating and how his son navigates, being the player that he is. But at the end of the day, you're still black, son, right? You're in these rooms with these white individuals, these white owners. You got to get what you can take. So I love that dynamic. And I think Rob Morgan, like I mentioned, is so fantastic. So those were kind of the standout performances, and I really enjoyed their narrative. The basketball side of this first episode, I absolutely love, and the discussion between Magic Johnson and his attributes being a 6'9" point guard, and how during that time, that wasn't something you wanted on your team. You wanted someone around that 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", quick. He can pass the ball. Obviously, he's the greatest assist man of all time, in my opinion. But, him and John Stockton, Jason Kidd, just to name a few. But he wasn't known as a shooter, so that perception of he's more of a center versus a point guard, I kind of love that. And there's a particular scene that kind of dives deeper into the point guard at that time during the Lakers and how he perceived Magic Johnson. I love the basketball talk in this show, and I'm a basketball fan, and I play basketball. I like how they use the old footage for the sport, but I will be keeping an eye, and I might be critiquing on them actually playing basketball. There is a scene where we see Magic Johnson playing basketball, and it was smooth. It wasn't a lot of cuts. I didn't see a stunt double, so I will be keeping an eye on how this show handles basketball, because, man, there's some shows and movies that try to do football, baseball, basketball, and it's like, oh, you can tell that's their stunt double. You can tell that they're cutting it up so much because they don't want the actor to look bad. So I will be keeping an eye on the basketball, but so far, the basketball elements of the show are handled pretty well. I will say, as far as maybe getting into some of my criticisms, the breaking the fourth wall is a very Adam McKay type of thing to do, and it's hit or miss. Some moments I found it to be entertaining. Some moments it kind of took me out of the show, but it wasn't really heavily involved in the second half of the show, which I appreciated because I really wanted to get engaged in the narrative. So again, breaking the fourth wall is hit or miss for me in general, but I think so far in this first episode, it was more heavily involved in the first half, but then they kind of let it go and kind of had more of a cohesive story in the second half. But getting back into one basketball moment in this episode, Magic Johnson versus the starting point guard during that time for the Lakers, that I don't know if that was dramatized because Magic falling. I mean, I know they were wearing street clothes, but I'm I don't think that homeboy would have broke Magic's ankles the way that he did. So I don't know if that was just added in for the sake of the show, or if that really happened, especially the way that moment made Magic question, should he go to the league? Should he go back to college? Which is another thing that I don't know if it's real, if it's just written in for the show for drama purposes. That scene was a little bit too over the top for me. But going back into another thing that I liked about the show, and this might be my favorite moment of the show so far, or first episode at least I should say, the moment where Johnson Sr. and his son are talking to Jerry Buss, and at the time, Cook was Jack Kent Cook. The slave type mindset that these owners had during that time, and obviously kind of still do during today's time, especially in the NFL, more so than NBA. And there's still some issues, racism issues in the NBA, but not as much as the NFL. But that conversation that they have where Magic at first, he comes in, he's eating the food, he's not used to the fish that he's giving them, but then once it came down to how much I'm going to be paid, I want to be paid the same amount that Larry Bird is paid. I'm better than him. We're coming at the same time. time, same age group, but you're going to give me less? Why is that? And then when, Cook says, boy, I'm like, oh, and again, it shows you the show's flashy, it's fun, it's entertaining, but it also can be very serious about tackling certain subject matters such as racism and how this white owner looks at this black basketball player as like, I own you, you're going to do what I say, and you better be thankful we're giving you anything to play basketball for the Los Angeles Lakers. So that scene to me really stood out. It touches on today's, mindset of owners, but also how Magic Johnson at 19 was very aware of his other peers. Even though he's black, I'm just as good, if not better than those white players, and I need to be paid just as much or the same value as them. So I love that conversation. I love that mindset of a young Magic Johnson, which makes so much sense to him now, being the billionaire. I believe he's still a co-owner of the Dodgers. Obviously he's in the movie industry with owning movie theaters and production companies. So it kind of shows you he's always been that person, even at a young age. But that was definitely one of my favorite moments in the show. And also tackling that same owner, Cook, how he handled his women in the sport, and how obviously nowadays we see how women are, very important to the NBA and also obviously WNBA, but how women like Dr. Buss's daughter, is a co-owner of the Lakers, and how things have kind of changed that narrative. So I love the show. It can be fun, it can be entertaining, but it also can talk about some serious stuff, which I appreciated. Which, speaking of serious, if you all know, for basketball fans, Donald Sterling was in this first episode, and boy, what a creep. He was a creep then, he's a creep now. I mean, what a terrible individual, but that scene just kind of goes again to show you that slave owner type of mindset that some of those white owners had and still have today, unfortunately. But again, wrapping all it up, I love the stock footage, the film look of the first episode, how they captured the 80s, who was the hit actor at the time, who was some of the best singers, who was some of the best athletes in the sport. I loved all that stuff. The title of the show, of the first episode, being Swan, and how metaphorically it speaks to all these characters. Everyone from Jerry Buss to Cook to Magic Johnson to all the other players involved, they're all like calm on the surface, but they're paddling like crazy under the water. And I love that metaphor to tie it to all these characters, especially Jerry Buss. One main criticism, Adam McKay, I always know him to have like very sharp writing, very clever writing. Again, going back, I know he's not the main writer, and he's not even, I don't think, a writer on Succession, but I know him to have those type of isms where it's like very quick, witty type of dialogue. It wasn't all that witty for me in this first episode. It wasn't all that clever in the dialogue. I do like the style. I like the flow of the show, but I was expecting a little bit more, the writing to be a little bit more sharper. And who knows, obviously we still got many more episodes to explore that, and I'm excited to do so, but I'm hoping for the writing to get a little bit more stronger. But wrapping up my last thoughts, again, I don't know if this was dramatized, but when Magic, the fact that Jerry kind of set Magic up to walk in the locker room, making his way to the court, and envisioning himself to be a Laker, and envisioning himself starting Showtime Laker. I like how they kind of ended the episode there. But again, I like the style, the flow of the show, how it captures the time, the behind the scenes of the NBA, of the 80s, of Magic Johnson, of Jerry Buss. I enjoyed all that stuff, and overall, I was pretty entertained. Again, I guess it makes sense because we are talking about the Showtime Lakers. But hey, that's my thoughts on the first episode. What worked, what didn't work, what I hope to see moving forward, and I will be watching this moving forward. But the question I have for you all, will you be watching this? And if so, do you want me to cover this on a week-to-week basis? Do you want this to be a weekly Sunday evening discussion? Let me know by liking it, sharing this video, leaving your thoughts in the comments. And of course, like I said, if you're a part of the Laker Nation, NBA, HBO fandom, come and join this community by subscribing, hitting that notification bell. Thank you for watching this review. Before you all leave, again, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. Hope you're being safe. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you enjoyed this review. As you can see on the screen now, subscribe to the channel. Check out my other content. We'll catch you on the next video.